My name's Jason Randall. I live in Eudora, Kansas with my wife and three children. We live on a hobby farm here in Kansas. I was in the Navy for 5 years back in 2003 to 2008. I'm a cartographer by profession. All the way back in about 2005, right in the middle of my Navy service, I had some stomach issues going on that they ended up testing. Ultimately, they came to the conclusion that I had reflux GERD, reflux disease. Put me on some, what do you call it, like omeprazole, Zantac type medications. And it was fine for years after that. Then about 2018, was when I was diagnosed. It was only about 2 weeks before, so it kind of blindsided us. I say us as my family, because my wife, I always include caregivers because they're often overlooked in this process too. But it was about 2 weeks before I had some severe abdominal pain that I'd never had before. And about maybe 2 weeks before that, I'd noticed that I wasn't going to the bathroom at a regular frequency that I had gone before. And then it just stopped and I started getting abdominal pain. And that's when I was like, okay, something's wrong. I need to go get this checked out. And which prompted my primary care doctor. I mentioned that I had a family history. Someone in my family, my mom, had diverticulitis quite a bit over the last couple decades. And they're like, oh, let's go. It's probably that. Let's get a CT scan just to make sure so we can put you on antibiotics for it. And once I had that scan, that was July 16th, I believe the scan was, they saw that about 80% of my liver was covered in what they appeared to be lesions, metastatic lesions. So that prompted a PET scan on the 17th, and it confirmed it. I had pretty much my whole liver was, not the whole liver, but the large majority of it was covered in metastatic disease. And it kind of started me into this world of advanced stage colorectal cancer. So if you look at the history all the way back to 2005, starting on, I think it was ranitidine, which is Zantac. And then when I got out of the military into the VA system, I was on omeprazole for 10 years. And then my doctor had mentioned that, oh, this with the advanced stage of my disease and the extent of it, that it had been in me for about 10 to 15 years at a minimum, which squarely placed it right in my military service as well. You hear a lot of people with colorectal cancer is like, oh, I had blood in my stool. I've never had blood in my stool, even after diagnosis. I think I've only had it at one point. And it's because I ended up having to have like a emergency stent placed shortly after diagnosis, just because of the situation at hand. And even then it was just like a couple of times. So I did have this the only other symptom I would say that was before the 2 weeks before diagnosis was I had something in my belly button that would appear maybe every 4 to 5 months. And by the time I could get in, it would go away. It only lasted for a couple days. And it was just like a little bit of discharge from my belly button and a little bit of hair follicles. Like, turns out that's right where my primary tumor was, along the sigmoid colon also. Even though it's in July, it'll be 5 years now on this journey. I was diagnosed July 17th, 2018. It was 2 days after my son's second birthday, and my wife was still pregnant with our third child, about 6 months pregnant. And so I remember walking into the doctor's office because after the CT scan, they called about 15 minutes later and said, hey, we need to see you tomorrow first thing. So I go in there and the doctor's kind of casually is just like, hey, I don't really know other way to put this, but you've got cancer and it's spread to your liver. And I'm like, okay. Kind of took a minute. And then as soon as I walked through the doors leaving the place, it was just like a rush of like, holy crap, like I'm a dead man. Like, because no matter how much you think you know about cancer beforehand, unless you've experienced it firsthand or been a primary caregiver or even secondary caregiver to someone, there's so many misconceptions about it. I thought I was dead. My wife was at the bowling alley with the kids and a friend, and when I called her, she just completely lost it as well. We were just, it was bad. Very, very dark times. We ended up coming home that night, and just my wife and I we had my parents watch the kids for obvious reasons, and we just kind of held each other thinking, how much time do I have? Especially with 80% of my liver covered, that's not a good situation. And I had a fully blocked sigmoid colon. And so they couldn't just go in and remove the primary tumor. I had to have that stent that I mentioned before open me up just for I could pass stool. And then everything from there was just a whirlwind, getting into doctors, getting the stent placed. It was emotionally devastating. And then after that, I was at my local hospital system here near Lawrence. But luckily I have a doctor cousin, my cousin Scott, who took me with his training. We called him, was like, hey, do you have any advice? And he's like, I want you to go see Dr. Baranda at KU Medical Center, which is the NCI National Cancer Institute here in Kansas City area. It's the only one in the Kansas City area. And so he came with me to the appointment. And that, I think, was a very pivotal moment in this also, going to one of the top centers in the area with that NCI rating. It's important to have that. And I believe I work in colorectal cancer support community and advocacy as well. And I think I heard at one time the average time for people going from symptoms to starting chemotherapy is like above 200 days, which is just insane to me. And I got in within 2 weeks. So I was diagnosed on July 17th, and then I had my first chemo on August 1st. So about 2 weeks later. And so it was just, I'm very blessed to have that team move that quick. A lot of it is very vague. It was just, okay, go see this doctor, see this, get this scope and everything. And it's a lot to process at first. And especially if you're not used to it, it's a lot to process, to listen to everything they're telling you, absorb it. One thing I've always kind of said is I'm very grateful for my oncologist at first, never ever telling me an expiration date or a definitive date. I did get told you have a terminal prognosis of chemo for life and inoperable due to your extending your disease. You'll never get off chemo, and you'll never be operated on for a curative intent. Palliative reasons, possibly, but it was basically, we'll do everything we can to extend your life. And yeah, that was a big pill to swallow as well. I don't know if I ever fully digested it, to be honest with you. It was something that I never believed I had cancer. I never kind of thought, I was like, it was all very surreal. It was just like, is this happening? Did I get phase shifted into some weird parallel universe? And this has got to be just a bad dream I'm in. When am I going to wake up? And so it was a lot to process that. And I just kept, every time I heard it, I would just be like, ugh, like, that sigh and that gruff, like, oh, like, no, this is, I don't want to hear this. This is not my fate. I just don't foresee this being me. So it was really hard to swallow, especially every time my oncologist was like, we'll do everything we can to extend your life, but you will be on this forever. So I was put on what they call full Ferinox. Sometimes they call it full Fox-Erie. It's basically how the drug's administered. And colorectal cancer, if you're not a candidate for immunotherapy, irinotecan and oxaliplatin, those are the two big drugs. And then what they also call 5-FU, which has been a standard since like the 70s. I had it's called the kitchen sink. So it was a combo of those three drugs. I started on August 1st, and I started with what would have been the first of 30 initial cycles. I did 9 of the full Ferinox. Then we paused to do what they call 2 Y90, which is yttrium 90. It's a radioactive isotope of the element yttrium. And what they do is they go through your hepatic vein in your groin, and they send a catheter up into your liver. So it's a liver-directed therapy. And they drop millions of radioactive resin beads right into your liver, where the tumors generally form based on where the blood flow. I had 2 of those in November and December 2018. And then I resumed on 11 more treatments of what they call Folfox, which is the previous one minus the irinotecan. They wanted to drop down the irinotecan part just because of the 2 Y90s. It's a lot to take on with the radiation. It's basically targeted radiation. And so ultimately I had ended up having about 6, I believe it was, of just the 5-FU, largely driven by blood numbers, whether my white blood cells were up or my platelets were high enough. My big issue was low platelets all the time, something I still kind of suffer from still today from all those treatments. And then after that, in about September of 2019, I had some lung spots show up. And so we switched the drug, oxaliplatin, because a lot of the times oxaliplatin causes neuropathy, severe neuropathy for people. Luckily, I never had too bad of that. And I ended up taking 20 cycles with that in the mix, which is a lot. Usually some people dip out after 4. Usually it's about standard, depending on which train of thought you follow. It's between 8 and 12 of those. And then after that, I started back on the irinotecan drug through a combo called Full Fury. And then we added a biological drug called Vextabix or panitumumab. And that's a epidural growth factor inhibitor, which basically prevents blood vessels from growing. And so then I did 4 more treatments of that through December of 2019. And then I stopped to take a break for Christmas. Throughout about January, February of 2019, I was just on a lot of treatments. My son that I'd mentioned was still in my wife's belly at the time. I caught him about 2 hours after my 8th round of that heavy chemo. That gave me a lot of motivation, wanting to see my kids grow older. It's a very powerful moment in my life. Seeing my son born, I was able to catch him. Both my sons were born here, right here at this house. My wife did a home birth. Bless her soul. I didn't think it would ever work out, but it did. And then it kind of got dark again. I had a surgery in January 2019 because the chemo was basically destroying my anus and caused a fistula to bore through. And so it was a lot of pain and everything. And then about, I believe it was early February at my institution, I found an integrative medicine doctor who I started incorporating a bunch of stuff. I actually found him through my dentist of all people, not through my cancer center. But I went to go see him and he joined my team. He was probably one of the biggest moments of my cancer experience as well. Not just like diet, exercise, which are important, but he also did a bunch of stuff to help mitigate the side effects, which helped a lot to get through it and process it. And one of the biggest things was the mind-body connection, a meditation that he showed me called psychosomatic wellness, which has a lot of science behind it. At first it was like, okay, whatever, I wasn't really big into that kind of stuff. Like, oh, this is the heebie-jeebie or whatever you want to call it. Like, just, oh, this isn't going to work. And then about a month into it, I connected to it. I went somewhere. I still don't know what to call it. Some people may call it, just universal energy, God, chi, soul, whatever you want to call it. I went somewhere and I connected with something. Sorry. It really helped me process things. I was able to accept life, death, purpose, what all this means. And I was just grateful for whatever was to come. And I kind of carried that in to this. And that's kind of where my story started to change a little bit as well. I ended up through Town, which is an online colorectal cancer support community. I learned about a doctor, Dr. Fong, who's a liver specialist. He's a surgical oncologist. He doesn't do just liver. He does a lot of stuff in the abdomen area, minus the colon itself. And people kept saying, oh, you need to go see him. You need to go see him. And so I had scans in December at my local center here, and even though I had a really good response to chemo, they told me, no, you're going to be on chemo for life and inoperable. Because they were scared that with the extent I had, if I did have liver surgery, luckily the liver grows back. It's the only organ that does that the disease would progress with that regrowth. And so even though they had my best interests in mind, I still sought that second opinion out of City of Hope in California. And so then ultimately it was my wife goes, you need to go see this. Let's go out to California. What are the worst they're going to say? No. And, and you're still the same. And so it was kind of like, okay, let's rule it out. If one of the top people in the world says no, then it's my fate. Lo and behold, it's probably the best decision of my life. It led to a surgery that was 12 hours long in February 2020. I removed my entire right side in what they call a right hepatectomy, and then a lower anterior resection or LAR. Removed 30 centimeters of colon and a quarter of my rectum with curative intent. And I also took my gallbladder. I had 5 ablations on my left side at the time. At that point, I had lost 110 pounds prior to that surgery. And it was just a kind of a culmination of a lot of things coming together. Yeah. So, and and that's not where the treatments end either. I stopped chemo after that just because I had 30 cycles and the 2 liver embolizations, and they said, "Oh, your body needs a break from all that." And lo and behold, about 6 months later, it returned. Um, but not in my liver, but or colon. It returned in my tailbone, and it started to infiltrate my tailbone. And so, let's see, when was that? That would have been October of 2020. I started back on the full fury with the Vextabix for 4 more cycles. And on my very last cycle, my 34th chemo, 2 days later, I tested positive for COVID. So, so that was a crazy week right there. And then COVID kind of delayed my radiation treatment, but in February and March of 2021, I had 28 full pelvic radiation sessions to the entire pelvic region, which kind of destroyed my rectum at that point. And for 3 months, it was pretty rough. I was sitting on the toilet for 3+ hours a day, not really living life, just kind of stuck. And then in June, my colorectal surgeon, who has helped me along the way. What I forgot to mention is back in the big February 2020 surgery, I had a temporary elostomy placed, which is where the small bowel dumps into a bag with a stoma. That was reversed in May of 2021, or my bad, May of 2020. And then so fast forward again to the radiation. In June of 2021, I had what they call an APR, an abdominal perineal resection. It's a surgery also known as Ken or Barbie butt, because imagine a Ken doll or a Barbie doll, they just have a straight stitch on the back side. They took my anus, my rectum, and in my case, my tailbone and part of my sacrum to get clear margins. And it was successful. It left me with a permanent colostomy bag. But it's been kind of a blessing in disguise, honestly. If you're going to have a broken bowel, having it removed, this has been great to me. I don't sit on the toilet 3 hours a day. I spend maybe 60, 90 seconds messing with bowel function now. I still swim 3 to 4 times a day. I get to play with my kids. Like I said earlier, I lost 110 pounds at one point through this journey. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever gain it back. But with the colostomy, now I've gone down to like a 1-piece system, and there's it's like a flange that adheres to your stomach. And once that gets on, a lot of people use either pace or what they call barrier or protective rings to help hold that on to prevent leaking. Leaking is the number one thing that gets people flustered. And in June is when I had the APR and I got the colostomy and my Ken butt and everything. After that, I had about a year worth of what we call NED, no evidence of disease. And then I actually had another reoccurrence in my lung, a spot that had kind of been on CT scan since diagnosis. They thought was scar tissue initially, never responded to any other thing. All the chemo I went through decided to grow in May of 2022. Didn't go on treatment because we caught it very early. I'm on a specialized, what they call ctDNA, which is circulating tumor DNA test, called Signatera. There's also another company, Guardant, has one called the Reveal. It's pretty much the same test, different companies. And what they do is they sequence the biology of your tumor, specific to the person. No one else, the signature will never pop up in anyone else. And what it can do is detect that circulating tumor DNA in your body. It's not cancer itself, it's just junk DNA our body puts off, but it has that signature of your disease, and they can detect if you have a reoccurrence. And so my tailbone reoccurrence was caught by that in September, October of 2020. And then after I went through the radiation, or the chemo and more radiation, and had the other second major surgery, I was about a year clear. And then I had that Signatera test detected it extremely low amount. It's still in kind of that testing phase. Not everyone responds the same. Their bodies aren't as sensitive to the test. So in May 2022, I had a spot come back in my lung. that grew, that was there, and it just decided to start growing. And so then ultimately in August of 2022, I had a biopsy that confirmed it was colorectal cancer in my lung, and an ablation the same day. I was in at 6 a.m. and I was out by noon working at 12:30. And so it was the least invasive. It allowed me to skip treatments with detecting it so early. And as of, let's see, Monday, I had a negative Signatera test come back, and I had my CT scans showing that I'm 9 months, no evidence of disease right now. And I've been off chemo for 2.5 years. Yeah, kind of surreal when they told you you'd never get off of it. And then here I am 2.5 years into it, off of chemo. Yeah, and I plan on setting records. So never going to be the longest person net ever. At least that's the way I'm setting my mind up for it. And I also do a lot of work now within the colorectal cancer support space. I work for Colontown. So since July of 2020, after I had my Dr. Fong surgery, and Dr. Kaiser was my colorectal surgeon, I reach out to a lot of people. I do work for Man Up to Cancer, with the primary goal is to keeping men from isolating during a diagnosis. Do a lot of outreach, a lot of support work, because I just don't, if I've got the knowledge, I'm so blessed to be where I am at. And if I can help alleviate someone's symptoms, give them peace of mind, or just provide some hope, I won't be quiet. You got to sometimes just take it day by day. Take every day, even if it's minute by minute, hour by hour. Do what you can to help yourself get through the day. It's hard to think in terms of hope when you are told, you're not going to have any other options, or it's a grave diagnosis. And sometimes it's hard to remove yourself from thinking way into the future. Join support groups. That's been such a big thing. And we see it day in, day out, where people are like, this was never my thing, and I've joined. And I just seen that other people, I mean, when you look at the statistics, first thing you need to do is never look at Dr. Google. It'll send you down a rabbit hole of despair. I had my first mental breakdown ever because of looking at Google and looking at like different statistics. And then I started thinking about my kids and stuff. And avoid that. But then also get in these support groups. Find your people that will lift you up, support you. A lot of people lose their support networks, especially once you find the flip side of when you're out of treatments. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm cured. Or everyone thinks, oh, you're done. You're never really done. Whether the physical stuff is over and the treatments are over, there's going to be mental and emotional damage. Don't dwell on that. Everyone kind of goes through this with a cancer diagnosis, and it's okay. It's okay to not be okay.